Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Jeremy Corbyn has placed tackling terror at the centre of an election campaign speech, his first since Monday's bomb attack. He declared that the war on terror is not working, and he pledged to change British foreign policy if Labour were to win the election to reduce the threat to the country. Political opponents have criticised the timing of his speech as well as his message. Our political correspondent Vicky Young's report contains flash photography from the start.
Jeremy Corbyn knows this is a sensitive time. After a terrorist atrocity, the Labour leader restarted his election campaign today, joining a silent tribute to Manchester's victims. But the Labour leader didn't backtrack from long-held views on foreign policy, making his case that it's time to do things differently.
Many experts, including professionals in our intelligence and security services, have pointed out the connections between wars that we've been involved in or supported and fought in other countries, such as Libya, and terrorism here at home. That assessment in no way reduces the guilt of those who attack our children.
Stressing his patriotism, Mr Corbyn repeatedly emphasised that nothing excused Monday's massacre, and he had this direct message for Britain's soldiers.
I want to assure you that under my leadership you will only be deployed abroad when there is a clear need, and only when there is a plan that you have the resources to do your job and secure an outcome that delivers lasting peace.
Mr Corbyn promised that a Labour government would give the security services the money they required, and cuts to police budgets would be reversed.
The issue of security could dominate the rest of this election campaign, and today Jeremy Corbyn has repeated views he's held for decades, that military action abroad has made the UK less safe. But to others, that sounds like an excuse for terrorism.
Senior Conservatives have been quick to hit out at the Labour leader, calling his speech monstrous.
This has been caused not by us, as Jeremy Corbyn would have us believe. It's been caused by a sick ideology, a perverted version of Islam that hates us and hates our way of life. And to say anything now to legitimate or justify those who have carried out the atrocity in Manchester is, in my view, absolutely obscene.
Thank you. Cheers.
The arguments have returned, and so have election photo opportunities. The SNP leader condemned the Manchester attack but said politicians shouldn't shy away from debate.
Bombing campaigns, whether in Syria or Libya, without a coherent strategy to tackle the underlying problems there, often hinder rather than help those situations. So I think these are the things that we need to debate, and debate vigorously.
This evening, Mr Corbyn faced more questions, this time on defence. Did he agree with Labour Party policy to renew Trident?
I voted against the renewal of it. Everybody knows that.
But can you tell the British people tonight that you support the renewal of Trident?
We're going ahead with the programme which has been agreed by Parliament and voted on by the Labour Party.
Do you support it?
Listen, my views on nuclear weapons are well known. I want to achieve a nuclear-free world through multilateral disarmament, through the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
How a country protects its citizens is now likely to be high on the agenda for the rest of this election campaign. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Now, the election campaign got back into full swing today, with polls showing that the Conservative lead over Labour is narrowing. This morning, Jeremy Corbyn drew a link between the UK's involvement in foreign wars and terrorism at home, arguing that British foreign policy had to change. The Conservatives accused him of a totally inappropriate and crassly timed intervention. Here's our political correspondent, Michael Crick.
As a surprise YouGov poll put Labour just 5% behind the Tories, Jeremy Corbyn returned to the fray.
Good morning, Mr Corbyn. Are you exploiting Manchester, Mr Corbyn? Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Are you exploiting Manchester?
And he chose not social care or pensions, issues which might help Labour, but terrorism, which most experts would advise him to avoid. He strongly condemned the bomb in Manchester, but also addressed Tory attacks on his meetings with Republican leaders at the height of the IRA bombing campaigns of the 80s and 90s.
I've spent my political life working for peace and human rights and to bring an end to conflict and devastating wars. That will almost always mean talking to people you profoundly disagree with. That's what conflict resolution is all about. But do not doubt my determination to take whatever action is necessary to keep our country safe and to protect our people on our streets, in our towns, our cities and at our borders.
At risk of accusations of exploiting the Manchester bomb attack, Mr Corbyn tried to draw lessons from it.
Our approach will involve change at home and change abroad. At home, we will reverse the cuts to our emergency services and police. Once again in Manchester, they proved to be the best of us. Austerity has to stop at the accident and emergency ward and at the police station door. We cannot be protected and cared for on the cheap.
More controversial still, he said attacks like Manchester partly resulted from British military interventions in the Middle East, of which Mr Corbyn has always been a leading critic.
Many experts, including professionals in our intelligence and security services, have pointed out the connections between wars that we've been involved in or supported and fought in other countries, such as Libya, and terrorism here at home. That assessment in no way reduces the guilt of those who attack our children. Those terrorists will forever be reviled and implacably held to account for their actions.
So a bold, perhaps risky decision there by Jeremy Corbyn to make terrorism the subject of his first speech after the Manchester bomb.
Interestingly, the Tories cancelled their main event today, a speech by David Davis, perhaps to give Corbyn more space, and then, as Boris Johnson did, to attack him.
Now is not the time to do anything to subtract from the fundamental responsibility of those individuals, that individual in particular, who committed this atrocity. And I think it is absolutely monstrous that anybody should seek to do so.
And Tim Farron accused Corbyn of putting politics before people.
Well, a few days ago, a young man prepared a bomb, went to a pop concert and deliberately slaughtered 22 people. Now, it seems to me that to choose to make a political point on the back of that is wrong. I disagree with Jeremy Corbyn's point, but I disagree even more strongly with his timing of making that point.
Whether Labour really has narrowed the gap in the polls, we should learn more this weekend.
Michael Crick reporting. Well, in a moment I'll be talking to Labour's Diane Abbott, but a little earlier I spoke to the Defence Secretary, Sir Michael Fallon, and I asked him why he had described Mr Corbyn's speech as muddled.
It's about foreign interventions, and he implies that somehow this attack can be explained away on the basis of previous foreign interventions by successive governments, and that's wrong.
I don't know which draft you've read, but I mean, the bit I've got is that he says the blame is with the terrorists. But if we are to protect our people, we must be honest about what threatens our security. We must be brave enough to admit the war on terror is simply not working. What's wrong about that?
Well, what's wrong about that is there have been attacks in our country that have been nothing to do with the war against terror. For example, 2005, the London bombings, that was well before we got involved in Libya.
2005 was after Iraq, wasn't it?
No, but it was before Libya. You know, the attack on the Twin Towers, that was well before the Iraq war. So there's no correlation here between foreign policy and this appalling act of terrorism. And that's where Jeremy Corbyn has gone wrong.
Isn't it possible that things like the Iraq war did not create the problem of murderous Islamic fundamentalists? But the war has unquestionably sharpened the resentments felt by such people in this country and given them a new pretext.
Well, I don't think you should allow pretexts for people who blow up innocent children.
Because those are actually the words of Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary.
Well, they're not entitled to excuses. You know, this was an act of murder, and of callous murder at that, taking the lives of innocent civilians.
What I just put to you was not Jeremy Corbyn, it was Boris Johnson.
Well, what were the words you were quoting?
The Iraq War did not create the problem of murderous Islamic fundamentalists, though the war has unquestionably sharpened the resentments felt by such people in this country and given them a new pretext. He goes on to say the Iraq War did not introduce the poison into our bloodstream, but yes, the war did help to potentiate that poison. That's exactly the same as what Jeremy Corbyn is saying now.
No, I think it's more is what he's saying that of what I've said. He said you can't use attacks like this to explain away terrorism.
Actually, on the contrary, he said it is difficult to deny that they have a point, the Told You So Brigade.
Well, I don't agree with that.
So Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, is wrong?
Well, I'd have to see the words that you're trying to quote to me. I don't have them in front of me.
Well, I've just told you them.
Well, I'll have to look at them. What I don't accept is that you can explain away terrorist attacks in this country by simply saying there's been an issue with our foreign policy over the last few years.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn agrees with you on that. He says no rationale based on the actions of any government can remotely excuse or even adequately explain outrages like this week's massacre.
Yeah, but he then goes on to talk about the war against terror, which he would like to have conducted in a different way.
Well,
Indeed,
do you think the war on terror is working?
Just a minute. Indeed, he implies that we should, in the end, sit down and talk to terrorists. Now, these people, the terrorists who attacked the Manchester Arena on Monday night, he didn't want to negotiate.
What makes you think the war on terror is working?
The war on terror in Iraq...
In a British context?
Well, as I've just explained to you, the war in Iraq is certainly working. Daesh have now been reduced to controlling less than 10% of Iraqi territory. They've lost huge amounts of territory in Syria. Over in Afghanistan, the government is holding the line against Taliban with a lot of international support, and both countries, both Iraq and Afghanistan, have been able to have elections and introduce education for their young people.
Let's talk about Libya then, because this bomber was of Libyan origin. But is it true that ISIL has grown in North Africa after the Libyan war?
ISIL actually has just been defeated in Sirte, where it's stronghold in Libya. But let's go back to your point.
But overall,
it looks like...
Look, if we could just have an answer to this question. Is the Select Committee right to say ISIL in North Africa has grown?
No, they're not wholly right. ISIL, in fact, has been defeated in the city of Sirte, that it was its stronghold. There are still some ISIL factions in Libya, but there are lots of other warring groups in Libya. And let's remember that Mr. Abedi's father was given refuge in this country because he fled Gaddafi's regime much earlier, before any British intervention.
Can I just come to the other main point of Mr. Corbyn's speech then, which is that at home we will reverse the cuts to our emergency services and police. There will be more police on the streets under a Labour government. What's wrong with that?
Well, the number of police officers on the streets increased slightly under a Labour government, and we had the London bombings of 2005. So it's not the actual number of officers, it's the resources you dedicate to counter-terrorism, it's the number of armed officers you're able to put out on the street, it's the amount of money you spend on your intelligence and security services, and all of those budgets we have protected and we're now increasing.
The Conservatives' Sir Michael Fallon, and with me now is the Shadow Home Secretary, Diane Abbott. How does Jeremy Corbyn know what was motivating the Manchester bomber?
He wasn't talking about the specific motivation of the bomber. And I was at the speech, and the speech wasn't about terrorism. The speech was about how do you keep the British people safe. And it's in that context, for instance, he touched on the loss of 20,000 police officers under Theresa May.
But days after the Manchester bomb, this can only be seen in that context. He is clearly ascribing motive, irritation at British foreign policy, to a man who just blew himself up in Manchester and killed children. How does he know?
He's not attributing motive. If we had not returned to the democratic process after the Manchester bombing, then the terrorists would have won. We've returned to the democratic process. Jeremy's made a thoughtful speech about how you keep the British people safe. He's certainly not speculating about any individual's motivation.
But isn't he misleading people when he talks about police numbers? Because while it's true to say that normal police numbers have fallen, the government has given extra money to the security services who tackle terrorism. 1,900 extra counter-terrorism officers.
But part of tackling terrorism is the information that you can get from communities. And it's so important to have a visible police presidents. And as I said, we were talking about how do you make people feel safe. You don't make people feel safe if there were 20,000 police officers.
You're using a terrorist attack in a political context to scare people about police numbers.
No, we're coming back to the democratic process. We're having a debate about a really important subject. How do you keep the British people safe? And it would be extraordinary if we couldn't have this debate when it must be to the forefront of everyone's mind.
Isn't part of the problem perhaps not what you're saying, but who's saying it? That there are ongoing worries about Mr. Corbyn's overall attitude towards Britain and your own. I mean, let's put the words that have been doing the rounds about you from decades ago, admittedly. 1984, you've been quoted as saying, every defeat of the British state is a victory for all of us. Now, you were talking about a Northern Ireland context. A defeat in Northern Ireland would be a defeat indeed. Why did you say that? That was 34 years ago, and I said a number of things 34 years ago, and I now know better as a Member of Parliament of 30 years standing. So you take that back?
I've moved on since 34 years ago. Have you?
Do you take it back?
I've moved on from 34 years. But
you also said you couldn't identify as British. Can you now tell the voters that you do identify as British? I was elected as a British Member of Parliament in 1987. I was the first black woman ever elected, and I'm proud to say I'm a British Member of Parliament. I have no problem with that at all. Diane Abbott, thank you very much for coming in. I've been getting away.